Hi everyone! Today we'll be creating terrain using Unity's Terrain Toolbox. Please make sure you've installed Unity 2021.344F1 and have chosen the Universal Render Pipeline with WebGL support enabled so your design will work with Spatial I/O. This tutorial will cover building terrain, adding terrain textures like grass and rocks, and placing trees along with a bit of troubleshooting. Now, let's get to setting up your project with key packages. Let's start with terrain tools. So go to Package Manager by clicking on Window and then Package Manager. In the Package Manager, make sure Unity Registry is selected in the top left corner. Scroll down to find Terrain Tools and click Download and then Install. As you can see, it's already been loaded. Click this button and download the Terrain Sample Asset Pack for free. After clicking Add to My Assets, a pop-up will appear asking if you'd like to open it in Unity. Say yes. Next, you'll need to install the post-processing package from the Package Manager. This is preloaded, but you still need to download it and import it into your project for it to show up in your project folder. The post-processing package will now be visible in your project folder under Packages. Then we will load the Terrain Toolbox. Hover over Window, scroll down to Terrain and select Terrain Toolbox. Then pin this window into the panel next to your inspector. This is where we can determine the overall dimensions of the terrain that you're creating. Now we're ready to begin designing our terrain. Start by going to the Terrain Toolbox window. Make sure the button labeled Create New Terrain is selected. Beneath this, you can choose your terrain dimensions. We will choose 1500 meters by 1500 meter terrain and a 400 meter height. If you want something very mountainous with deep valleys, you may wish this to be much higher. Once you have the dimensions set to what you prefer, click the Create button at the bottom of the panel. Next, let's start with the terrain tile selected. Switch to your inspector window. You'll see a transformation section, a terrain section, and a terrain collider section. Let's start with the transform section. We will want to change the terrain position to y equals 100. This gives us the opportunity to create depressions in the landscape more easily. Next, we'll switch over to the terrain section. You'll see 5 small buttons. The button on the far right looks like a little mountain with a gear icon next to it. This is your terrain settings. Here we can adjust the terrain resolution, you can add textures, you can include trees, 3D objects like rocks, and you can even control the wind's impact on the leaves. Let's sculpt. Select Paint Terrain from the inspector. Then click on the little drop-down. It's not obvious at first. Make sure that Raise and Lower Terrain is selected. The brushes section is below this, with several brushes for creating landforms. Beneath this, there are brush mask filters, which we are going to skip in this video. And finally, there are stroke controls. We can control the strength, size, and rotation of each brush, along with stroke spacing. Select a brush from the menu. Let's grab this simple soft circular brush. Now click and drag to raise the terrain, and hold Control while dragging to lower the terrain. Adjust the brush size and strength using the sliders below the brush selection. The size slider sets the area affected by your strokes, and the strength slider controls the intensity of the effect. There are some shortcuts that make this process faster that you'll want to play around with. Hold D and move your mouse to change the rotation of your brush. Hold A and move the mouse to control strength. Hold S and move the mouse to control the size of the brush. Holding Shift we'll put your brush into the smoothing mode, and holding the Control key will allow us to depress the landform. There's various options for creating effects, so play around with each brush type and stroke control options. You can create hills, valleys, ridges, and other features to make your terrain look as natural or as fantastical as you'd like. Let's paint some textures. Return to the drop-down list and change your selection to Paint Textures. You'll notice 2 new sections, Material and Layers. The Material is preset to Terrain Lit, and this is fine as is. In the Layers section, you won't see anything yet. We have to add each layer, and we'll want several. Okay, let's add a few options. Click on Add Layer beneath the Layer palette. Select a texture. We'll start with grass. Click on the Close button at the top right, and you'll see the grass layer has just been added to the palette. Let's repeat this for adding some textures like dry grass, sand, rocky materials, whatever you want. Once these material layers are added, go ahead and organize them as you'd like.
The layer on top will cover the entire area of the terrain tile. To paint, select the layer you want to start with and click and drag on the terrain. Use different brush sizes, opacities to blend things smoothly. To make any adjustments to the scale of any pattern, go to the Layer Properties section beneath the Layers section. This will allow you to change the size of the tiles. You can also adjust other imaging factors here as well. Take some time now and play around with adding textures to your terrain. Now we're going to add some trees to the scene. With the terrain selected, go to the Inspector, the Terrain section, and click on the Paint Trees icon. First, you'll notice some simple instructions for adding and deleting trees. Beneath this, you'll find the Trees section. There are no trees currently added, so let's add some now. Click Edit Trees and press Add Tree. Click on the Target button to choose a preloaded tree from your assets. Or you can go to your project window, go to Assets, and choose from any you already have downloaded. You can leave the LOD index set to last and press Add. Now you can adjust the brush settings in a similar fashion to the terrain landform brushes. You can also create randomization and variations in tree height and width. We can paint trees on individually or use the Mass Place function to cover more area. Let's try the Mass Place option. Click on Mass Place Trees. A box will pop up. Here you can add any number of trees. Let's get into LODs. Let's say you want to mass place some trees. So you add one of your prefabs, but get a warning about renderers. Don't panic, just take note of what kind of renderer it needs. Let's double click on the prefab of this particular tree so we can get a better understanding of the issue. In the hierarchy, you'll be shifted into the prefab isolation mode. Here's our tree prefab and the 4 LODs that are set up. You see each one in the inspector. We will want to open up each one and determine which levels have the wrong kind of renderer. In this case, it's both LOD1 and LOD0. First, we select one and then remove the faulty renderer component. We then go to the component menu and add a mesh layer and a mesh renderer. Next, we'll add the appropriate materials back in. And now we're going to repeat the process with another LOD. Once we've replaced both sets of renderers, we'll go back to the prefab's parent level. In the inspector, we'll now check each LOD for renderers and select the new ones for LODs 1 and 0. Once those are set, we can exit the prefab isolation mode and start placing trees. You'll notice as I place these trees, we're seeing billboarding. Don't panic, just go back to your prefab and adjust the LOD percentages in the inspector. All set. Now that we have our terrain all set, we will export it as a package. This will serve as a handy backup. First, go to your terrain in the Assets menu. You'll see a few here, but this one with the little play icon is the one we want. Right-click on this terrain tile and select Export Package. Now select all dependencies in the pop-up and press Export.